So we are speaking from the Barn Cinema today ahead of a screening. The date you need to put in your diaries is the 28th of April, and it is 8 p.m. for the screening start. We will then be doing a Q&A, but please do come to the bar here at the Roundhouse at 7 p.m. if you would love a drink with us. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and the film?
Hi, Ali. I'm Katheryn Trenshaw, and the film is called In Your Own Skin. And it's a film that I actually started almost 10 years ago. I had a little bit of a delay, the reason for which will be revealed when you see the film. And the inspiration was very much to do with happiness, paradoxically. It's like, what makes us happy? And back then, particularly, it was a radical new idea, this social work research that had been done, that basically the less we carry shame, the more genuinely, authentically, connectedly happy we become. And of course, no one wants to look at that. That's sort of unspeakable territory, and it's the parts of us that we don't want to reveal. But I had a kind of breathtakingly clear experience of that myself, and I thought, this is what I would like to do for my next giant project. I've done some really big projects that have lasted 10 to 15 years, and I thought I'd like to do another really big international project. So that's what I decided was worthy of my time and energy and life force, and here we are.
And can you speak a little bit about what it is like working on a project for that length of time? What growth do you see? What changes within yourself as well as the project?
Well, it's absolute madness and wonder. It's a really big commitment to lifestyle as an artist and a creative. It's not for everyone. I wouldn't recommend this. It's utterly not for the faint of heart, but I'm not faint-hearted. So, that seems to be what I gravitate toward. I'd rather do something that I can really get my teeth into and kind of live, eat, breathe, and work on and live for a long period of time. I think it sort of changes your cell structure a little bit. And in this instance, going around the world and asking people the question, what's true of you but not obvious to strangers, is amazing. Because when you ask people a heartful, with kindness question, and you're really without judgment, they are amazing. I mean, people are absolutely amazing. And when they feel that you can be trusted, I've had this experience over and over and over. I'm not accosting strangers, but I am inviting many strangers to enter into this inquiry with me. And once they're sort of they realize I'm not a creep or something like that, it becomes this amazing, I just fall in love over and over and over with these amazing beings in the world. So you can't do that quickly. I mean, each conversation I have, especially because it involves moving around the world, each conversation involves a great deal of time, and then the editing for each person, it's days and days and days per person. It's not just like, I don't jump people and ask them a question and run, it's a long and involved, intimate process. I was thinking of this woman, Moa, I was waiting for someone else to do their portrait outside the British Museum. And he was late, and he let me know he was late. So I was sitting in a cafe, and it's really packed. This is before COVID. And this gorgeous woman was sitting at a small table by herself. And I was like, do you mind? In a tiny, tiny table. But I thought, well, maybe I'll ask. And I had all the camera equipment with me. And she's like, well, what are you doing? So I told her, this woman was just arrived from Sweden. And I told her about my project. And she was fascinated. She's like, wow, that sounds fantastic. And I was like, well, do you want me to do your portrait? And she's like, I'd love to do that. And she was so excited. And then we started, entering into the question. And what she arrived at was the fact that she'd had incapacitating depression for 15 years. And this was the first time she'd ever traveled alone. It was the first time she'd ever been away from Sweden, and the first time she'd ever been away from her husband. And so it was a really big celebration for her. So I think that was also why she was very shiny. But she was very beautiful, very radiant. And there's something about the paradox encapsulated in her portrait and her interview where she's so beautiful and so happy. And you'd never guess that she had suffered so much with incapacitating depression. And as it turned out, it was just a coincidence. Whilst we were doing this process, her phone had gotten a message from her husband, and he'd had a stroke back in Sweden. She had to rush home and help him. But she said because she had done this, she felt very capable, more whole, more kind of liberated. Even if they're not an experience that one has had exactly, there's an element to each one where we all know that inside of ourselves.
And is this a project that continues? So, like, will you find yourself catching up with her? Have you still kept in contact?
I'm still in contact with everybody who's involved in the project. In fact, they call me, they contact me like, how's it going? And I was kind of out of the loop for a while, and I got phone calls while I was unwell, and people stayed in touch. And yeah, no, and I have this kind of process by which when I do their portraits, I also gift them with a print, their own kind of original, proper on photographic paper print of their piece of art. And so they all have that as well. So we stay connected.
Can we talk about the presentation of the project as well? So what made you want to do it as a film? Because we've also got still images. Can you talk to do you feel differently about both pieces? Did you feel particularly drawn to doing one or the other? Or do you feel, no, it had to be both?
Well, it's three things, actually, four things. So that's the other thing about doing a big project. So I want it to have community involvement, community engagement. I want it to be something that's actually like a love letter to humanity. So from the beginning, from its inception, it wasn't just the film, and this is a bit, or I get a little overambitious. I knew I wanted to do the documentary. I knew I wanted to do a book. I knew I wanted to do the portraits, giant portraits. For some reason, there's something really impactful about these banners being 2 meters by 2 meters that can hang indoors or outdoors. And they just have something that everyone who sees them goes, wow, these are amazing. And then involvement with communities, so workshopping with communities and really kind of having people engage in some of the inquiring questions that come out of the project, which has proved to be quite something. I feel like I'm only just beginning that part of it. So as the film tours, it was actually designed in such a way that there's enough time after the film to kind of engage the community and sort of work on some inquiry together, not in a way that's invasive or stepping over anyone's boundaries. Similarly, that I didn't do that either. I'm not asking someone to kind of dredge up something super, super raw. I'm asking people to share something they feel very able to, but still a little bit edgy, just a little bit of a stretch, not a tear. So I also invite in community conversations, that kind of thing. It's a little bit like we're in difficult times right now. It's going to get more difficult. So how do we become more comfortable with discomfort, for instance? So it's kind of like a stretch, but we need these skills. And it's very interesting. The feedback has been amazing. From very short interactions, people can really get it. And
was that what inspired you to do the project? Where did the idea come from? Was it that you mentioned, wanting people to be comfortable with discomfort?
Yeah.
Do you think that's the acorn?
The acorn, well, I think originally it was sort of like the quote unquote ugliness of vulnerability and the things we're ashamed of. So it's like I had a really profound experience where I was on a silent retreat, 2 weeks of silence. I was really up against my own shit, basically. And I remember I'd been crying and I had snot coming and I had a headache. I had like a migraine. I was really just like so raw and undone and kind of unpresented. There was no presentation left. It was like, here I am, and I'll never forget, my teacher saying, you have never seen you look more beautiful and radiant than now. And I knew it was true. It was like it was all presence and there wasn't any presentation left. So it's like that, in a way, these are the conversations I'm inviting people into. It's like, what's underneath your presentation? What's underneath your social personality that's actually much more beautiful? The thing we most want to conceal and hide. And yet it's when we become very shiny and luminescent almost. And I see that in the portraits. It comes through in the film and in the portraits. And
so was it hard? Can you talk a bit about the people involved in the project, the before and the after? Was it hard to get these people to share their stories? How did you find them to start with? And then, after they did you find they had that sense of relief and, that radiance?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's so easy to find people when they get my vibe, if you see what I mean. I'm not building myself up, but because I don't kind of accost people, I do invite people. And I remember once there was a guy named Eric who's in the film. Oh, he was so amazing. And we were in this cathedral that it was dilapidated and falling apart. You could see the sky, you could see stained glass windows, but you could also see the sky through the roof. It was very dramatic. And I went there specifically. I had a specific reason for going to this cathedral, but then there was this man singing the Our Father in this shambles, looks like a war zone, And I thought, ooh, I bet he's got a story. So I went up to him and I said, I'm doing this project. You seem very interesting. Would you be willing? And he goes, how did you know? And I thought, I guessed that you had an interesting story. And then he started telling me his story. And I was like, hang on. Could we film this? And he, so beautiful, so beautiful. And, at the end, he also sang again for the film. He's in the film. And I don't know, his hunger to be seen authentically was met with my curiosity and interest for his beauty, if that makes sense. I mean, I have had some people who've refused, they're few and far between, but there are a few people who are like, no, I don't do that. One guy participated by saying, because I also write the words on their skin. So that's another piece I didn't think I mentioned just yet. And one guy participated fully, but his thing he shared is, I don't like writing on my skin. So he put it on a piece of paper, which was his little rebellion. And I quite liked it. It's like, that's his thing. And so he was participant fully, but, with a boundary. And so, yeah, I mean, Central Park in New York City, my friends were like, no way is anyone going to talk to you in New York. You're crazy. I'm like, well, we'll find out. And as it happened, I didn't have enough time to film all the people who were willing, so in a way I find I have to be more picky.
Speaking of being picky,
Yes.
Can I ask you so you've got a show going on at the Green Table here at Dartington?
Yes.
At the same time, or leading up to the film screening. What can you talk a bit about what the process was for choosing the people you chose?
Oh, that was really hard. Who to hang? Which banners to hang? Well, it's funny because there are going to be pieces at the round table as well. So in a funny way, I see them all together. In my head, they're all together. So there are 5 banners that are hanging. But I mean, Matt Harvey, who doesn't love Matt Harvey? He's been quite a part of the local stand-up performance poet. He's kind of a genius. And he was hugely supportive of the project. He was participant in the first 2 big fundraisers for it. And really, I also presented at the Transition Town event in Battersea in London that we did. And he was introducing it and being part of it. So he's a favorite. And then Moa is in that show, Incapacitating Depression, as well as a young woman who has Afraid of the Wind written. And that's a very interesting story too. And then over here, we're going to have a couple more. So I was going for diversity of age, diversity of gender, diversity of skin color, really just trying to get a wide range. Everyone is different, but still those elements are quite important. Different colors, different flavors, and different
And with some approaches. Of them, the words that are written on them, like some of them you say are like incapacitating depression. So that's kind of the thing they feel.
With a big smile on her face.
Yeah. Like, what made them choose what they chose, if that makes sense as a question? So if you're like Afraid of the Wind, it almost feels, I mean, probably quite difficult in life, but
yeah.
What was the process for them?
Well, I give a context for each piece in the book and even in the gallery, so you can see the story of how they arrived at that story. And I think that's part of my job as the listener, is to help them. They might have a short list to start with. I kind of give them questions. If you were walking in the underground in London and you're passing hundreds of people, what would they never guess? They might, if they saw you, for instance, they say, oh, you're young and you're beautiful and you're this and you're that. They might even make suppositions about your religion or your ethnicity, but they wouldn't know blah, whatever blah is. So that's the starting point, kind of coaching people to help answer the question I'm actually asking. And then usually what happens is that we both go, that's juicy. It's sort of surprising, a little left field. It's not boring. It's not obvious, that kind of thing. Because obvious is kind of boring. You know, if it's something everyone would guess, or if it's a little bit of a undigested, so still too undigested thing, it doesn't quite have the juice. So yeah, that's part of why it takes time. It's not something that's quick. It's a conversation that can last a few hours if necessary.
And I guess that's the beauty of film, is that you can sort of take those stories and make them a bit more digestible, but also make sure that other people see
the
them.
beauty of editing and the painstaking long investment of editing down to the gems.
Yeah,
it's curation though.
Yeah, I the thing that's the interesting thing that maybe folks don't realize about making a documentary is that it's
most of it's thrown away.
If you do a Marvel film, you know what shots you're trying to get, whereas in a documentary you end up with, it's sad, isn't it, like all these hours of stories. But thank God, like some of the stories are coming to us via the screen this time round, which is great.
But it's similar in painting. You know, you paint over and over and over, layer after layer after layer, and you cover things because it wasn't quite right, or it could be improved, or the layers. In some ways, those edits, they're all in there. Like, everyone's in there. It's just that we're showing the curated version of the whole.
Yeah.
It's the hundreds of thousands of trees like this. Like I was mentioning earlier, before we started recording, that there's this variety of aspen tree called the pando, and it appears as if it's hundreds of thousands of trees, but actually it's all the trees are one. They have the same exact DNA. It's not many trees, it's one. But it's sort of like that. We appear as many, but we're all connected. And I think that's quite reaffirming to our nervous systems as well. And that's kind of the feedback that I've been getting. It was my hope, but the feedback has been greater than expected.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into my final question for you, actually. What do you want the audience to take away from the screening? How would you like them to leave feeling?
Well, I think hungry for authenticity. Is not in a needy, wanting like a bigger, better, faster, more way, but in a kind of quiet, simple, satisfied, sated sort of way. Like, oh, we don't have to go looking for bigger, better, faster, more, so much as who are we, and be genuinely curious about ourselves and those around us, because it's so polarized right now. I've never seen in my lifetime anything so polarized. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but I do believe it's become incredibly polarized. Whereas this is like, well, what about the paradox? How do we dance with the paradox and the nuance and the subtlety, rather than just this kind of gross, as in not very refined way of being? So I want people to be curious. And I certainly expect that they'll go out and perhaps engage in the inquiry that's invited in the course of the film. And there are a lot of kind of teachable moments in the film as well that are kind of derived from it, and also from my background as an art therapist and working with embodied consciousness. So that sort of comes through as well, not in a hitting you over the head religious way so much as a sort of, well, let's look at this in some of the big picture ways. How can we get perspective again about this connectedness? It's so compelling to think we're separate and alone, when in fact we are never separate and we're never alone.
I think that's the beautiful thing about being able to watch a film like this together in a cinema.
Exactly.
Well, like experiencing it as one, watching other people's reactions and thinking, what if they feel the same way as I am?
And having the Q&A is really special, to be able to get that. But when people have seen it, of course, there's that buzz in the audience where people are genuinely kind of, I don't know, inspired and perturbed and a bit unsettled in a really positive way, that they can kind of possibly change their lives to settle more. There's all these paradoxes. I love like how we're, you want to go forwards, so you have to go backwards, or you want to understand the big picture, so you have to really dive inside, and all those different ways that are kind of non-dual practice. And funnily enough, I also love the fact that we're at Dartington, and that the NHS, the seed of the NHS, was sown here. And so this, in a funny way, is like a kind of RX. It's my prescription for humanity and for community to be more whole, is to engage in these kind of inquiries. So I'm really excited about that tie as well.
I think that's a beautiful place to leave it. And to remind people, do come and chat to us in the bar at 7:00. That's before the screening. So that's on the 28th of April. Put it in your diaries. We will be there answering questions for you. I think we're gonna get a lot of questions, so I'm gonna probably not say too much and leave it up to the audience, I think. So come ready with your questions, everyone, and we hope we see you there in droves.
Great, thank you.
Lovely project. Thank you for speaking to us today, Katheryn, and we can't wait to see you on the 28th.
Thanks.